Well, hello there and welcome. Okay, so today I had a question from the lovely Lotte, who asked me if I could go into in a little bit more depth about how to use the gradient tool in Pixlr. Now, if you've done my Pimp That WordPress course, you may have already discovered Pixlr. It's basically like a really simplified online version of Photoshop. That is essentially what it is. It's not by the same people, it's a very similar but much more simplified version. And it's online, so it means you don't need to install anything. If you've done my Pimp That WordPress Site crash course, you might have already come into contact with this. But if not, the way to get it is to go to pixlr.com, that's pixlr.com, and here it is. So what we first want to do is create a brand new document. Now we're going to ignore all the other options in here and we're going to go to the advanced editor. And from here we're clicking on the create new image button. Don't need to do anything, I'm just going to make it a standard 800 by 600 just to give you an idea about how to make this work. So the tool I really want to talk with you about today is the gradient tool. Now, what is a gradient? Well, it's basically something that goes from one colour and fades really softly into the next colour. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to go as softly, but traditionally a gradient will fade from one colour into another colour, or sometimes from one colour to a different colour again, and then another colour. You can have as many colours as you want gradiating into each other. Is gradiating even a word? I'm not even entirely sure. I'm going with it though, it sounds good. So anyway, how do you use it? So if you've ever been on Pixlr before, or if you've ever used Photoshop or something like GIMP, then basically it's a similar sort of layout. You've got all your layers over here, so this is, you can put different images on top of different images on top of different images, and it means that you can target the specific layer that you're after rather than having to mess up everything around you. Now with the gradient tool, you can either target the entire layer or you can target a particular shape. So I've got a background layer here. What I want to do is create a new layer on top of that, which I'm going to rename. So I'm going to rename this by double clicking on the label layer 1 and call it gradient backdrop, just to show you how that works. So pretty simple. So far I've just created a new layer on top of my background layer. Now my new layer is in fact completely transparent. Now what we want to do is create a gradient on this layer. We're going to have it covering the entire layer. It's going to be rad. Okay. We're going to click on the gradient tool. Excuse me for the barking in the background. Anyway, you click on the gradient tool, and up here you've got all the options. So what it says, opacity is 100%, so basically that's how opaque it's going to be. At 100% it means it's going to be completely solid. There's going to be no fading. It's going to be a solid colour, it's going to be a solid gradient. You're not going to be able to see anything underneath it. The other options we've got up here are the gradient colour. Now this at the moment will fade all the way from white all the way through to black. That's a pretty standard gradient colour. Along again we've got type, so we can either have it linear or radial. So a linear one basically means it goes in a line, so it goes, essentially it looks exactly like this gradient here. It will go from white into black along the screen. The radial, what that means is it will go outwards, so it will start with a pocket of colour in the middle and fade outwards into a circle. So that's quite nice if you need to have a nice sun in a nice radiated colour. Yes. So what I'm going to do is show you a basic one, which was just going to be a standard linear gradient. So that means it's going to be in a line. Linear equals line. We all know that, surely? Maybe? So what you're going to do is you've selected your gradient tool, you click somewhere, in fact anywhere on that artboard, and you drag it across as long as you want. And you drop. And as you can see, it's changed it from white all the way through to grey, all the way through to black. Now I can go in again and do a completely different gradient over the top of this in a different angle. And as you can see, what that does is it follows that line. So I'll do it like that, and you can make the gradient even shorter, so you can see the amount of time it takes to fade, or the amount of space, sorry, it takes to fade into the other colour is much shorter, just by how much you actually drag it. You can drag it all the way across, you can drag it a little way across, and it always follows that line. So a radial one looks like this. Now, so the line here follows the radius. If you want it to be a bigger radius, obviously you just make the line longer. Normally you would go from the centre, but sometimes you might want it as a sort of rising sun effect, where it goes from the bottom of the page all the way outwards. But that's how you do it. You just click on the page, you drag it as long as you need it, and you just keep going until you've found something you're happy with. Okay, so that's all very well and good for a black and white gradient, but that gets a bit limiting after a while. What we want to do is change the colour of it. Now if you click where the gradient colour is, so the gradient colour is obviously going from white to black, and it will show you in here to the whole gradient tool. So there's some preset colours here, which are all quite lovely. There's a lovely pink one, and there's a green one, and there's a red one, and an orange and blue one, and a rainbow one. So you can use any of these colours. But what if you want to maybe create your own colours? Here's where it gets interesting. So I'm just going to start with a standard black and white one, because normally we want to go from one colour into another colour. Now, this has arrows. You've got one arrow, which is the white arrow, and one arrow, which is the black arrow. When you click on them, they control that particular end. So for instance, this is white, the opacity on it is 100. That basically means that is going to be full on white, you're not going to see anything behind it. Now for instance, if I took that all the way down to 0, now this changes the gradient completely, because what it will do is it goes from black, it fades out into grey, but it starts to actually lose opacity, so it starts to become transparent as it goes towards the edge. So what I've done is I've created a solid background, and what I've also done is just hidden that other gradient backdrop just by unticking that box by the side of it, so I can't see that layer anymore. It's still there, but I've just hidden it. So I'm just going to create a solid background, just by dragging across the rectangle tool there, like that. There you go, it's all red. Now to show you how the gradient with transparency actually works, I'm going to click back into the gradient tool, and as you can see, it goes from black into this sort of checkerboard. Now the checkerboard basically tells you that it's all transparent. And you just drag and drop. And as you can see, what that's doing is it's fading all the way from black all the way out into the red. So it kind of gives you a bit of a black hole effect. So that's another really handy tool when you're looking at the gradient tool. Something else that you can do with gradients is obviously choose your own colours. So we've talked about the transparency. This is now the opacity. I'm going to waz that back up to 100. There we go. I'm just going to go with it. Now I've selected this, and it says the colour is white. So if you double click on where it says colour, and you can go and pick a completely different colour. Green, and let's have some full-on green action. And at the other end we want it to be like a kind of purpley pinky colour. Lovely. That's really delightful. Look at that. I can just change it back to linear as well. That is just beautiful, isn't it? Yowzers. So there you go, that's how you create a gradient with 2 colours. But say you wanted more colours, that's really simple. Just click directly underneath that gradient, where at the top, the gradient bar at the top with the arrows, and more arrows will be created, which you can fill with whatever colours you like. So just click out of the gradient toolbar and just drag it along, and you can see that it creates that really lovely gradient I've created. So now you've got the gradient actually fading nice and softly into another colour. Maybe you don't want it to fade so softly into another colour. Maybe you want it to be almost quite a harsh change into the next colour. All you have to do is move one colour up against the next. So it still gives that little bit of softness as it moves into the next colour. But you don't necessarily, but you can drag it across the entire page. I mean, that's quite interesting when you do, there's some different colours here. Let me drag this one up to this one and maybe this one up to this one. So you can get sort of more of like a barred effect across the whole page. It just gives a bit of a different effect. It's something else that you can do. It still looks kind of cool. I mean, it's not necessarily the colours that I'd use, but you know, that is how you do it. So there we go. I've gone through exactly how to use the gradient tool, starting from simple black and white, changing the transparency on one of the sides or both of the sides, changing the colours on both of the sides, adding more colours in, and how to fade less softly and more softly. Oops. So, hope you found this helpful. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks very much. Bye bye.